Now let's talk about intent filters. They provide the ability to launch an activity based not only on an explicit request but also an implicit one. Now I understand that you haven't really understood the meaning of explicit and implicit, so let's discuss them briefly. An explicit intent is basically when you specify the start and end of your movement. What we mean here is that if you want to go from one activity to another activity, you have to mention the names of the activities. So you will be telling the system that you are going to move from main activity to display message activity. If you remember, in our example, when we had to move from main activity to display message activity, we created the intent like this. So we will say that this is an explicit intent because we are specifically mentioning that I'm going to move from this context. This could also be written like this: main activity. I'm sure you know this. Activity dot this, and it can also be written like this. So you're basically telling this Android system that you're going to move from this activity to this activity. So this is an explicit intent, and explicit, as the English word suggests, it means that something which is very clearly mentioned. Implicit intent is you specify what is it that you want to be done, right? Moving from main activity to an activity that can compose an email. Right now, this is a very interesting case. In fact, this is the actual power of one of the actual powers of Android, wherein you can actually make the user move from your app to another app in just by just using the implicit intent. You just have to make sure that you specify the intent filters and specify the actions that you want to perform in a correct way. So you can take advantage of this feature by declaring an intent filter attribute in the activity element. For example, if you remember, just now we discussed that there is this main activity, which is generally the default, or let's say the activity which the Android system opens up when the user opens the app for the first time, right? It's the launcher activity. So what you need to do is you need to mention the action element and optionally a category element or a data element. These elements combine to specify the type of intent to which your activity can respond. So in our example, wherein we said that you want to move from main activity to an activity that can compose an email, the email activity or the developer who created the email app will have to put these intent filters inside the activity of their email composure activity. Right? These elements combine to specify the type of intent to which your activity can respond. So the email app activity, which is going to compose the email for the user, will have to put these intent filters so that these action, these category, this data, so that their activity gets chosen by the Android system when somebody initiates an implicit intent to write an email. All right. In this example, the action element specifies that this activity sends data. So this action element is basically going to specify that this is activity which is used to send something, right? And these all three things will actually act in totality so as to make sure that only this particular activity is chosen by the Android system. So this one provides the action which is to send. This is the category by default. This basically means that from all the activities that are present in an email app, this is the one which is going to get chosen. And this is data, which basically means that if the user wants to send a simple email with text or plain data, then this activity should get chosen, right? The category element as default enables the activity to receive launch requests. So this activity, this default will make sure that the activity gets launched, and this, like I said earlier, is basically to show that the type of data what is going to get involved in this transaction. Right? So here is an example which is provided in Android docs, which basically tells us how would you initiate this activity. So this is an implicit intent, and here you just create a reference of the intent, and then you start putting it putting action here: set action, set type, set put extra, and then you provide the message here, and then you start the activity. If you intend for an app to be self-contained and not allow other apps to activate its activities, you don't need any other intent filter. So you just have to make sure that in case you don't want any other activities to enter your any other app to initiate an intent so that your app can be opened up, you just have to make sure that you don't put any intent filters. So basically the Android system will not consider your app to be opened by any of the intent or implicit intents, right? Activities that you don't want to make available to other applications should have no intent filters, like I said. Declare permissions. Let's go to Android docs and discuss this. You can use manifests activity tag to control which apps can start a particular activity. A parent activity cannot launch a child activity unless both activities have the same permissions in their manifest. So the permissions is one of the features of Android system which allows you to give permissions to different apps in order to utilize your app, right? For example, if your app wants to use a hypothetical app named as social app, let's say there's an app called a social app, and you want your app to use a social app activity to send something, right? Let's say this social app has a feature wherein you can share some stuff with your friends, and you want your app to utilize this feature. In that case, this is only possible if the social app itself must define the permission that an app calling it must have, right? So this is a permission that your activity has, which is com.google.social app permission share post. Then to be allowed to call social app, your app must match the permission set in social apps manifest. So this is social apps manifest, okay, and this was your manifest. So your manifest is this, and you are giving a permission such as this, and in this user permission you are giving share post, right? You are not giving, sorry, this is the permission which has been given by the social app developer, right? So these two things should match, and only then you will be able to actually utilize this app to share anything, right? Now let's see you in the next video and discuss managing the activity lifecycle.